You're listening to Chin Chats with Spencer Moore on the Harry Chin podcast. These are honest conversations with women about what self-advocacy looks like in their lives. The messy, imperfect, and human. Let's get started. Hi there, and welcome back to the podcast. Today I want to talk about some things that I have been seeing everywhere, all over my newsfeed, social media, and honestly, they have been living rent-free in my head for quite a while. The first is about Melinda Gates committing $215 million to women's health. And the second is a resurfaced report from the McKinsey Health Institute saying that closing the women's health gap could add up to $1 trillion to the global economy annually by the year 2040. I'm going to be getting into all the details, and I'll be honest, all of this is amazing. It's money being donated to women's health, and it's transparency about women and the workplace. But there's one thing I just can't let go of as I read these articles and I see how much traction they are getting out in the world. And I imagine this might be a bit controversial, but here's what I really think. Women's health does not start at midlife. And I want to talk about why I feel that way and why this really strong feeling has come to the surface as these two topics have completely taken over the narrative around women's health. To start, I want to share what I'm seeing on the daily as a female health educator and advocate. I have interviewed dozens of women. I have done research, I have read books and articles and sat with stories. And what I cannot stop seeing is that women's health affects women across their entire lifespan. It is not something that suddenly appears when estrogen starts to drop. There's so much that is happening before that. I see women with endometriosis, which can take an average of 7 to 10 years to diagnose. I see women with PCOS, women managing chronic migraines since their teens, women with autoimmune disease, complex, undiagnosed conditions. I see increasing cancer diagnoses in younger women. And I see women who have spent years, sometimes their entire adult lives, seeking answers for conditions the medical system has never had enough time to unravel. I'll come back to these women because they show up in the research too, in a very specific and important way. I also want to mention that I am a 43-year-old woman. I'm currently entering perimenopause with all of the side effects that I have been reading about online. They are real. It is a roller coaster that I would love to get off, and I cannot. But I also have a history of hormone-positive breast cancer. So I have a very personal stake in this conversation, like millions of other women like me. It's a bit more complicated than it looks on the surface. More on that in a bit. I want to talk about what I feel the current conversation around women's health is focused on at the moment, because it's important context. There has been a lot of talk lately about women leaving the workforce because of menopause, and that conversation is real and very significant. Research shows that 1 in 10 women quietly exit the workforce because of unmanaged menopausal symptoms, and often at the peak of their careers. Another 1 in 5 are considering retiring early because of menopause. Stanford economist Petra Persson has coined the term the menopause penalty, meaning that women's earnings can drop by as much as 10% at the very moment they should be at the height of their professional power. The Mayo Clinic has calculated that missed workdays due to menopausal symptoms cost the U.S. economy $1.8 billion every single year. These numbers matter. This conversation matters. Women in midlife have been invisible in healthcare for far too long. And I'm entering that stage of my life as well, and I feel it. I understand more than ever why this conversation needs to happen. Now here's the McKinsey report, and this is where I think it gets really interesting. The McKinsey Health Institute, in partnership with the World Economic Forum, published a report in January 2024 that found closing the women's health gap could add up to $1 trillion to the global economy annually by 2040. For every $1 invested in women's health, about $3 comes back in economic growth. Now here's what the report also said. It said that women spend approximately 25% more of their lives in poor health than men, roughly 9 years on average. Now, women live longer than men, but they are spending more of the years that they live in poor health. Now, these numbers are staggering, but here's the finding that I can't stop thinking about. The report also found that only 5% of women's health burden comes from reproductive and maternal health. These are the things that we have historically called women's health. Only 5%. The other 95% is everything else, and I say that in quotations, everything else. These conditions are the ones that fall out of that narrow definition, even though they are disproportionately and profoundly affecting women every single day. The report specifically identified 9 conditions driving that gap, among them endometriosis, migraine, breast cancer, PMS, and PMDD. These are not midlife conditions. These are the exact women I was describing earlier, the ones I see all the time, the ones in their 20s and 30s who are sick, who are struggling, and who are being left out of this conversation. The women's health crisis is not a menopause crisis. It is a lifespan crisis. So what does this mean for the economy? Because a lot of times when things start affecting dollars and money is brought into the situation, people start paying attention. We talk about the menopause penalty, women leaving at the peak of their careers, and that is a real economic cost. But I want to ask the question underneath that question. How many women never even entered the workforce fully because of a chronic illness that went undiagnosed for a decade? And how many never had the chance to find out what they were actually capable of because they were spending every available bit of energy and dollar just trying to feel okay enough to get through the day? The economic gap doesn't begin at perimenopause. It begins the moment a woman's health starts limiting what she can do. Because the cost of undiagnosed endometriosis isn't only in the year she loses at midlife. It's in the decade she spent being dismissed. McKinsey tells us the women's health gap could cost the global economy $1 trillion a year, but that number assumes women made it to the starting line. What about the cost of the women who didn't? And that brings me to Melinda Gates. On June 4th, she announced a $215 million commitment through her organization Pivotal. The focus areas of this donation are contraceptive access, maternal care, and menopause, with $10 million of that donation going directly to the Menopause Society. This is good news. It is real and meaningful and long overdue. And I want to be clear about something. This is not at all criticism of Melinda Gates. This is not a criticism of the menopause conversation or this donation. The truth is the McKinsey report was released in January of 2024, 2.5 years ago. But it is being resurfaced, it is coming back to conversations because of this donation by Melinda Gates. Every dollar going towards women's health is a dollar that wasn't there before. And that is an amazing, beautiful thing. These doors aren't just being opened, they are being unlocked for the first time, and I'm absolutely here for it. Now I want to return to the personal part I mentioned early. I am 43 years old, I am entering perimenopause, and I have a history of hormone-positive breast cancer. But here's my complicated piece of it. Hormone replacement therapy is talked about everywhere right now as the answer for menopausal symptoms. And for many women, it absolutely is, and I'm so happy that those women have that option. But for me and for millions of other women with a history of hormone-positive breast cancer, HRT is not on the table. And navigating perimenopause and menopause without these options is challenging. That gap is real. And I genuinely hope that some of what gets funded through these investments eventually reaches women like us. But the women I want to end on are the ones I think about the most. The women who never made it to midlife career success in the first place. Not because they didn't have the drive, and not because they didn't have the intelligence or the ambition or the capability, but because their health got in the way before they ever had the chance to build what they are capable of building. I very much consider myself to be one of these women who has dealt with chronic illness all of my life. I chose to become self-employed for most of my career, and part of that was absolutely a health decision. I have worked traditional jobs, but it has been hard in ways that are difficult to explain unless you've lived it. When your health is poor, managing your body is also exhausting. And the added pressure of an inflexible job, of not being able to call in sick without consequences, or needing to perform on days when you're genuinely not okay, is just unsustainable. And I know that I'm not the only woman who has quietly made this calculation. So when we talk about the $1 trillion impact on the women's health gap, I want us to also be asking about these women, the ones who never got to be counted in the workforce statistics because they couldn't get there. The ones whose contributions we have never seen because their health stood in the way. This is not a midlife issue. It is a lifespan issue. Female health affects women from their teens through their 20s and 30s and midlife and beyond. And if we are going to truly close this gap, if that $1 trillion number is going to mean something, we need to see all of it. We do not have to choose between menopause research and research for younger women. The answer is not either or. The answer is the full picture. I'm so grateful that this conversation is finally happening. I'm grateful for every dollar going towards women's health. And I hope that as this momentum grows, we keep widening who we're talking about until the answer to which woman includes all of us across every decade, every diagnosis, and every condition that has been quietly limiting what women can do and who they can be. Women's health doesn't begin at midlife, and it doesn't end there. Thank you so much for being here today. These conversations mean absolutely everything to me, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for sharing your time with me today. If something in this episode resonated with you, don't just sit with it. Take action. Share the podcast with someone who needs it. Leave a review so more women can find these conversations, or sign up for the Harry Chin newsletter to stay up to date on everything we're building. If there's a free cheat sheet connected to this episode, you can find it at theharrychin.com. Life takes a village. Thanks for being a part of ours. See you soon.